Hi everyone, my name is Palesa Madumo, convener of the 2021 PRISM Awards. I am also your host for a very special series called Byline, where I will be chatting to different people within the industry. Today's guests I am very excited about because they are from the PRISM Young Voices program. It's been running for 3 years and it's an opportunity for under 30-year-olds to essentially get an opportunity to mingle, ask questions and learn from senior practitioners through the actual process of the PRISM Awards. Welcome Fezaka Khatebe, Simbongile Ndlangisa,
Thank you for
as well
having me.
as Candice Maresia. Ladies, how's it going?
Things are good. How's it going with you?
Good, good. In fact, let's start with you, Sim.
Sure.
So you are the winner of an actual PRISM Award. So like a big up for that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to find out, as an entrepreneur, as a PRISM Young Voice, has it done anything to sort of advance your business life?
Oh, for sure. I mean, having started Millennial Media in 2015, and sort of it was a side hustle for the longest time. I think doing the PRISM Young Judges, and now it's called the PRISM Young Voices, has definitely sort of opened my eyes to the industry. It was a great learning experience, and I think it gave me really great context in terms of how to work within the industry, who sort of the industry players are, and so all the sort of intricacies. And then when I interned at an agency, obviously I built on that. But in terms of it helping sort of running a business, it's been incredibly sort of helpful. I think it has worked to, I think, validate and legitimize a lot of the work that I do. And it's a really great cosign, you know, if you run a PR consultancy like I do. So yeah, I think it's definitely been helpful. It has definitely advanced sort of my business, also with the kind of sort of clientele that I can access, and also referrals, because we make great connections, you know, through the PRISM Young Voices with senior judges as well. So, you know, someone will say, okay, well, this is not going to work for my agency, but maybe, you know, it would be great for you. So it's been incredibly helpful.
Fantastic. I mean, that's always good to hear, because I think the industry needs a lot more sharing and collaboration amongst senior professionals and, you know, juniors, or entrants like you were when you were selected as a PRISM Young Judge or PRISM Young Voice in 2019. Fez, you were a UJ student at the time. How did that feel? What was that platform like, and what did you do with it?
It was amazing. Even now, when I think about when I got that email, I was so happy. It really made a lot of difference, especially I was about to like start my career. I was about to go to the industry. I was still a student, so I really needed that, you know, that opportunity to, you know, like gain some sort of experience before I started my internship. So it's something that I needed. It was a breakthrough for me. Yeah, it was amazing.
Fantastic. And how did you find sort of interacting with some of the industry people that you perhaps as a student wouldn't have had the opportunity to do?
I mean, I've always been so curious about certain campaigns, certain advertisements, and I didn't know who were in charge of those. And then when I got to, you know, interact with the senior judges, and they're like, no, my agency did that. I was like, what? You did that? That's so cool. And I had to go back to school and, you know, tell my peers about this and that. And they were also, you know, interested and excited to hear that, you know what, we actually have a great future ahead of us. There's something exciting that is waiting for us. So it was amazing. It was really amazing.
Stunning. And Candice, you were part of the 2020 cohort, which is the most recent. Obviously, we had COVID-19, so there were limitations in terms of, you know, how much exposure you got. You've been in the industry for a long time as well. Well, not that long, but you know, for a young person, you've earned your stripes, and you work in a very serious environment. You know, reputation management. How have you been able to fuse your experience as a PYV with the work that you do?
I think I want to say that I'm privileged enough to work for a company that's been in that space for I don't want to say a bit longer than me, but it certainly started off when I was still finding my feet or deciding what I wanted to study. What was interesting though, especially you mentioned COVID-19, was as a reputation industry, we had to adapt. And then we had the PYV program that we usually have, which went online, which was a huge change. And we're looking forward to the event, but it went virtual. I think what was interesting enough, though, is that I got to be exposed to the PYV program still and go through the journey with my peers. And I think what was interesting enough from a corporate perspective, and that's what we kind of define the reputation more serious space as, is that we kind of move our office wherever we are. So you've got your heels and your suit on and your laptop with you, and we're kind of adaptable already. We can go into a client space and become part of the clients, or we could be at a coffee shop and working from a coffee shop. So the adjustment for me, yes, it was big and I was kind of disappointed in it, but it was easy for me to adjust. I think one of the most important things was certain meetings I had to wear heels just to channel the personality that I got used to at the office. And it was, I mean, it was interesting to see the different experiences from my other fellow PYVs. Some of them are like very out there, they people's people, they loved the interaction, so they weren't really used to it. But they got to share in our experiences from a different perspective, which kind of helped.
Oh, fantastic. It all sounds like you guys had a good jump start. You know, certainly it made an impact from wherever you already were. Faiz, let's come back to you. So you're originally from KZN.
Yep.
What attracted you to this industry, and why did you then decide, you know what, I'm coming to Joburg?
It's a funny story, actually. So I've always been a science person, not because I wanted to be, but because of the school I was in. They always said if you want to have a good career and a stable career, you have to do accounting or science.
Yes.
So I thought that maybe I'd make a great career in science, but my heart was always in media. But the problem was that I don't want to be in front of the cameras, you know, and be a presenter, but I want to work behind the scenes, and also I like writing, you know. So what career can, you know, help me to do all that I want to do? And I have, obviously I went to Google, and, you know, I Googled what I can do, and there was like marketing, you know, PR, and other media stuff, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I went for PR at UJ.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, that's such a heartwarming story, but also shocking at the same time that, you know, in this day and age, it seems like, you know, whoever's responsible, whether it's corporate or government, still hasn't been able to permeate in terms of communicating important careers that are not traditional careers. So it's quite interesting that you still have to scourge and search for our industry. I think it's a challenge that I definitely put on you guys' laps, you know. How do we bridge that gap? How do we, you know, create communication channels so people are able to understand what we do?
I think it definitely is gonna require sort of us that we're in the industry to start sharing more about the things that we do. I mean, with the way the technology is moving and, you know, the advancements in social media and the different social networks that we have, we're seeing a lot more people sort of sharing their daily lives, and that sort of includes the work that they do. And I think back to what Fezeka was saying, she wanted to be behind the scenes, and PR is kind of like a very behind the scenes career, and people that usually do it kind of like sort of just, you know, getting on with it. But I think if we could sort of just lean on and incorporating sort of the different communications channels that we all have now and start sharing more about what we do. I know it's something that I'm trying to do, but it's something I struggle with, and I think I've said this to you before, but it's very difficult to sort of put yourself out there. But I think it obviously works to sort of build up our industry and sort of make people more acquainted with what we do. And also it helps, I think, potential clients as well, because someone might not know that they need PR.
Exactly.
And you know, the more we share about what we do, what its purpose is, you know, insights around it, I think the more people will sort of be quick to know and identify when it is time to sort of lean on someone that does PR.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think we're on the right track. We've just got to keep pushing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a lot of the time, there's just no time. You know,
Exactly.
that's really
Exactly.
the major problem, because we are very busybodies in this industry.
That's so true.
But you know, just to put a bit of a controversial spin to things, Sim, you mentioned, you know, PR people are behind the scenes, and so did you, Fez. But we're also seeing this trend of sort of agency owners wanting to be, you know, in front of the camera. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's such a terrible thing, you know, or should people remain behind the scenes to do the work that we do?
Well, personally, I feel like PR and reputation management has shifted hugely over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Before, it was very traditional. You don't know who the face behind the brand is. But if we want clients to see that we're actually good at what we do, sometimes we have to become that. So a client wants you to change their brand, but the first thing, and with Google, the first thing people do is Google, oh, that's Palesa Madumo, let me Google what she's about. And the first thing that pops up is your brand, your personal brand, moving away from Vuma. So it's important that that personality is managed. I do believe that there's a thin line, like there's a huge gray line, or rather a red line of what you shouldn't be doing when it comes to social media. There are conversations that you should be engaged in. You should show that you have an opinion. I mean, if you're good in front of the camera, why not be in front of the camera? You know, in PR, sometimes you're running a production, your personality that's supposed to be the presenter's late, why not become that for your client?
Yeah.
And I think that PR now fills the gap so much. It's gone are the days where we just write a press release. I mean, we're in production half the time. Sometimes you become a producer, then you're a social media manager, and then you're running an event, and then you become the MC because the MC dropped out. So you kind of have to become what you're selling to your clients. Yeah.
It's so true. I think flexibility in this industry is so key. Speaking of what good PR is, let's talk about your podcast, Good PR. For me, I feel like South Africans took a while to catch up to podcasting. Where would you say, in your opinion, as someone who works with podcasts and also has one, where are we at? Is there a future of podcasts? And tell us a little bit about yours.
So I'll start with the second part of the question, then go back. I think podcasting, you know, in South Africa is growing hugely. And there's so many sort of different voices that are available through podcast mediums. We're also seeing a lot of the big sort of media companies also getting into it. We've seen Prime Media sort of have a podcast sort of program, and a lot of, you know, other radio stations as well. And I think it's a natural progression. I mean, the way digital media is moving and digital communications, it only makes sense. The more time we spend on our phones, the less time we're spending sort of listening to the radio. So obviously there's going to be, you know, some sort of online shift. Exactly. So I think it's definitely growing, and I think it's exciting from a PR perspective, because I think the more we see a traditional media decline, you know, from our, you know, print titles, from your different radio stations and radio shows and sort of television programs are getting, either they're dwindling or they're becoming more niche in terms of what they focus on. It's exciting to know that there are new media platforms that are popping up, like podcasting, like YouTube channels. We have Clubhouse now. There are so many different things, and I think it is restoring my faith a little bit, because I won't lie, there was a time where I was just like, ooh, okay, I don't know, are we going to be okay as we are? Like, who are we talking to? So I think it presents a great sort of channel, I think, to assist in sort of getting client messages out there. And from a podcasting perspective, as someone who podcasts, I think specifically with the Good PR podcast, I think I really I've wanted to podcast for a very long time, but I could never settle on a topic or settle on a theme. And I just decided, let me just do PR, because it's number one what I do. And I also felt like, again, back to this point that we keep sort of hopping on, is that there isn't enough information about the industry sort of on platforms that are easy to digest and easy to get to. And I also wanted, because I've, in my sort of career in PR, met so many sort of great professionals, you know, fellow PYVs, and I actually wanted, other people to know more about what they do behind the scenes. So like Fizika was saying, like she would see these great campaigns and not know who were behind them. So I actually wanted to sort of bring that to light and almost have our own little, powwow session. So that's where the Good PR podcast came from. And I was really surprised actually by the uptake of it. I was like, yeah, sure, 5 people will listen to this. And I was like, that's fine. Like, that's okay. If like one person listens, it's great. I actually got a message on LinkedIn the other day with someone just like, oh, I was listening to your podcast, and it's so great that I could find information about the industry that I'm in, and it actually made me think, okay, it's time for like to do another season now, because I was just
we're
getting a bit lazy, but also the time thing. There's like so many things to do in a day, but yeah, it's been great, and I actually hope like more people in PR find different ways to share about the things that they do, where even if it's a YouTube channel, even if, no matter what it is, I think the more sharing we do, the better.
Absolutely agreed. And speaking of which, Fez, I want to ask you, in terms of the industry being open to youth, do you feel that it is open? And if not, where are the opportunities for that to happen a lot more?
I feel like it's getting there. It hasn't like opened like entirely, but it's getting there, because I mean, there's still, I'll always talk about student. I'm like the voice of the students.
Yes.
Love that.
There's still like people who don't understand what is going on in the industry, like where they're heading to. And, I was so lucky, like I'll always say that I was so lucky to have been part of this initiative, the PYV, because it really helped me to even see what kind of PR that I want to do, because you think that it's just PR.
It's not all one thing.
Yeah, it's not all one thing. There's so many things that you can do, but you can't just, you need an opportunity for you to find yourself and find your feet, find what you are good at. So we need like these kind of opportunities so that we can understand where we're heading and what we're good at. So I feel like the industry hasn't opened entirely, but it's getting there, because there are some like graduate programs that agencies have for students who are fresh from university that can, take part in. So we need more of those. We need more.
Sure. And then Candace, as a young woman of color in this industry, do you feel that your voice is heard? Do you feel that you're represented in boardrooms, having worked in the industry for the number of years that you've worked in the industry?
To be honest, if you asked me 2 years ago, I'd say no completely. Because I've sat in rooms where there's a male CEO, and because you're the female of color, it's hard to come across or even present a report that's of interest to him. It's kind of like your voice is overshadowed in a AGM meeting, or you join their board meetings and it's like, okay, why are you here? Let's continue with our meeting. But that has changed completely, and I think it's also because I've been exposed to different agencies. I've certainly am lucky enough to work for an agency of color, where it's not just that we're of color, but it's because we have the skill set to bring you what you require from us. So when we enter a room, it's not that it's gone are the days I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I need to speak a bit louder. It's like I'm here because of my skill set, and because my employees believe in it enough, then my voice in a boardroom, I bring it upon myself to, it's either sit forward and say, okay, this is what we're here to do. Or if I'm in a pitch, make sure that I'm heard. If someone asks a question, you try your best to address it. But you still find, unfortunately, I mean, I have peers in the industry that always share their stories on social media. And on Twitter, there's always conversations. And you still find that, especially females of color, especially because you find that you go to an organization and the GM, for example, is a male. And they just like, no female is going to tell me how to run the ship. She's employed because it's that window washing when it comes to transformation. So she's going to be here. We're going to issue a press release. And it's like, yay, the face of color has joined the building. But then their voice is not heard. And they end up leaving. And it's a cycle. But I surely believe that it's changing. Yeah.
Those are critical points that you've raised. And I feel like it's an everyday struggle that we have to keep on, putting effort into, so that it becomes easier and easier, and more normal, really, because it's as normal as walking into any room, whatever you look like. You work with young people, influencers, the famous people, the hashtaggers. Tell me a little bit about what what that's like compared to traditional PR, because I feel like you've had an exposure to both. And where do you see the future of PR with that in mind?
I think again it's exciting for PR as well. I think if the industry is willing to innovate at the same speed or at the same rate that social media is innovating, and the way that people are using social media, we have influencers now. I think it's very exciting, and I think I would. If I was maybe a bit older or senior in the industry, I would compare it to sort of the same way that television had an uptake and the same way that magazines had an uptake. It's just the same thing. It's just adapting to new channels of communication. And I think the more we keep that in mind, I think we'll be fine, as an industry. But I think for some reason there seems to be some sort of lag in now this uptake and sort of this moving with the way that social and digital communications is moving. And honestly, I couldn't tell you why that is, but I think there's definitely a slow but steady uptake of it. And I think if we are to move forward as an industry, it's very important for us to sort of start thinking like the creators that we see, the influencers that we see. It doesn't mean to say that you need to become an influencer, but just to have an understanding of what that entails. If someone's making a YouTube video, what that's a production essentially. And Candice was saying, like, as a PR professional, you wear different hats, and same applies here. And I think if we just sort of have that understanding, it becomes much easier to collaborate with these creators. The same way you would collaborate with a radio producer on a certain show, the same way with a publication, and sort of come up with like really exciting concepts to communicate. It's honestly the same thing. I think maybe where the challenge is it's so much easier now to become a voice with digital communications and social media, that there's so many different kinds of channels that you can sort of talk to, and maybe that becomes discouraging because it's just like there's so many people, like where do I even start? But I think it's not to say we don't need to know everything. We learn every day. But I think if we just keep a really good understanding of and keep innovating, I think we'll be fine.
Absolutely. So in wrapping up, I think it's always important to have the voice of the future sort of direct the future. And so I kind of want a conclusion from each of you, whether you want to look at it from a visionary perspective or from a perspective of what's happening now in relation to what should happen in 10 years, let's just say. What can the industry do better, in your view, to make sure that it is all-encompassing, all welcoming, all the things that we've discussed today, and more importantly, positioned better?
I think I'd speak from a young voice perspective, and I think it's time for the industry to include us in the beginning. The industry tends to adapt to trends, so they see like the big names hiring young people, then this influx of, oh my gosh, we need to get the young voices in. But it's actually incorporating us even into the business development side of it. Use our ideas and fresh minds from the beginning. Let us grow with your business. I mean, I know that there's still the older generation that don't want to adapt, right? But let us also teach you. We're there to learn. Let us also lend a hand to teach you and take you into our world. So I think it's time for the industry really to incorporate us more in the beginning. And honestly, think of internships as your future employee. Stop training us for the 1-year contract and then letting us go. Like, build us to build your brand. And to be honest, that will take us like way further than where we are right now.
Very, very impressive. Thank
you.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to echo what Candice said, and I think just add that I would love to see the industry sort of using young voices in more senior positions, more senior conversations. To quote The Little Mermaid, it's a whole new world.
I love that.
And I think, this generation has, I think, a greater understanding of where we are in terms of communications and, again, in terms of digital. So it only makes sense to lean on us. But also, when we sort of give insights and we give advice, take it seriously, because that is what we know. It's what we've grown up with, and we've become so adaptable, so flexible. And I think we have a greater understanding of sort of branding in this new age. So that is what I'd love to see, sort of more young people in senior positions, making decisions, being listened to. And I think another thing I would say is, again, continue learning. I think technology is not going away. Digital technology is not going away. Social media is not going away. There might be trends that pop up every now and then, but the trajectory of it is not going away. So it only makes sense to sort of learn. I mean, I was in a TikTok summit the other day, and it was free of charge. Like that, those are the sort of things that, are not going to cost you anything but some time. And sort of the insights that come from that are invaluable, and you can actually use it practically, in your everyday work life. So those are my two things.
Absolutely, that's absolutely fantastic and spot on, really. Yeah. Fez, how do you see it?
So for me, I'd really, really love the industry to include us from the onset, like Candice said. They shouldn't include us because they want to be relevant or they see other people doing it, but they should include us because we are good. We know what we are doing. Yes, we are still learning. We're always learning, but I feel like the youth is like the trendsetters. We are the trendsetters, and we are very I don't know how to put this, but we are very informed about, the streets, what's happening on the ground. Yeah. So I feel like the information that we get would really help agencies or any other organizations to, do well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I mean, there was a point where I knew everything that was happening on the streets, and I now realize that I don't. So,
and to add to that, I feel like we have Gen Zs now. So we also the same thing that we're telling sort of, the older generation to do. We have to start doing that as well, because, I think this generation, like the Gen Zs that are coming up now, as much as we have a great understanding of digital, they have a whole other perspective. So, I mean, it only makes sense to listen to them,
Also, to add on what she just said, I also want to say we also need to meet the industry on, we meet them halfway by equipping ourselves.
For sure.
For example, I work at an NGO sector, and it's completely different to the agencies and your corporate. But I just don't sit and say, oh, we don't do this yet. I equip myself. There's some online learning tools where you can learn how to do your media list, your everything that you need to know in the PR industry. So let's not wait for the industry to recognize us. We should just equip ourselves and meet them halfway.
I absolutely love that. I love that, because sometimes also, there's this idea of this super confidence that comes with, millennials and Gen Zs, for example, which I find, really admirable. But sometimes you're right. I think it is about meeting halfway. It's quite important, for all of our progress to do that.
Tap into programs like the PRISM Young Voices,
Right.
That's equipping yourself. That's equipping yourself.
And it's so easy, it's just a matter of, and you're right, following the right people on Twitter as well, and just keeping your ear to the ground, because it's not always that an older person should force feed or drip feed you information. It should be the other way around. Absolutely.
I think the best advice I received from an employee, or is it current, it was take yourself seriously if you want others to take you seriously. And I think with our generation, we need to learn that yes, we want to be empowered, but empower yourself to receive what you're asking
Yeah.
for. We have this tendency of being like, no, make our voices heard. And then we sit at a table and they're like, it's ideas time. And we want to come with like shoddy sketches. So you kind of need to meet the older generation halfway as well, to Fez's point. I mean, if the older generation has a PowerPoint way of doing it, also adapt for them to understand what is that you're trying to bring through. So I think we need to like empower ourselves a bit more as well, so that we're also ready to embrace what we're asking for.
Absolutely. And on that very empowering note, ladies, thank you very much. It's good to have you here. It's good to see people like you sitting on these chairs and having bold and brazen conversations. And congratulations, you know, you've all come really far, and I feel like, you know, a platform like the PRISM Young Voices has just been a stage for you to perform what you were going to do anyway. So congratulations and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Byline PRISM Young Voices. You can also follow everything that has to do with the awards this year on @the PRISM Awards on Twitter. Gracia Marcel once said, "Preventing the conflicts of tomorrow means changing the mindset of youth today." Goodbye.